Temptation Island is one of the best and most underrated dating shows currently airing. From an avid fan of reality TV, I can tell you that every single iteration of this show is an absolute hit. It's also a show that is incredibly gendered, with the female protagonist in one villa and the male protagonist in another. One thing that is really evident in every franchise is that with the male protagonist, often there seems to be a dissonance between who they think they are and who they are in reality. They often explicitly equate their existing character to their aspirational personas. This makes for incredible television, but often leaves our female protagonists and the audience feeling confused by this contradiction. For example, in the season currently airing on Netflix, we meet Brion. He perceives himself as a Christian man who loves his girlfriend Shantae and is a prime candidate for marriage and fatherhood. But he is also extremely vocal about his penchant for threesomes and his voracious sexual appetite. For me, where the dissonance was really evident with him is that he viewed his sexual appetite not as a contradiction to these aforementioned religious values, but as a failing on his partner's part when she declines to fulfill his more extreme desires. If you are wondering how Christianity and threesomes could possibly mix, you are not the only one. Following his journey made for a confusing watch as his perception of his character failed to match his evident promiscuity and disrespect for his various sexual and romantic partners. R.W. Connell's gender order theory recognizes multiple masculinities that vary across time, society, culture, and the individual. In her seminal work, Masculinities, she describes the 4 types of masculinity as hegemonic, subordinate, complicit, and marginalized. Hegemonic masculinity is defined as a practice that legitimizes men's dominant position in society and justifies the subordination of the common male population and women and other marginalized ways of being a man. In other words, contemporary hegemonic masculinity is built on 2 legs: domination of women and a hierarchy of inter-male dominance. It is also shaped to a significant extent by the stigmatization of homosexuality. With the absence of an economic ecosystem through which our male protagonists can utilize to ascribe each other's value and thus create a hierarchy, Brion's sexual dominance of the women in the house allows him to become the leader of the pack. This establishes a hierarchy of inter-male dominance amongst the male protagonists and the basis through which it is established. The other men go to him for approval and fail to hold him accountable when his actions explicitly contradict his stated values. In fact, we only see him face accountability from Amir, one of the female participants placed in the house with our male protagonists, who declines to go on a date with Brion precisely for his contradictory behaviour, which she argues fosters a lack of accountability. Accountability is the centre of this. A lot of the male protagonists describe themselves in sanitized terms to remove their complicity in upholding the supremacy of hegemonic masculinity, to the detriment of more feminine gender identity categories. They fail to hold each other accountable for fear of shining a spotlight on their own cognitive dissonance. By the end of the show, Brion is met with a lot of grace from the host Mark, the other female participants, including the ones he discards after use of their sexual labour, and his girlfriend, who ultimately decides to stay in the relationship despite his infidelity. This grace allows for him to reflect on his upbringing and the role that plays in his promiscuity, with him ultimately pledging to go to therapy in order to receive professional help. With Brion being framed as the ultimate antagonist of the show in its latter half, this ending definitely does not enable viewer satisfaction. The use of television as a format creates the expectation that the villain will get his comeuppance. But this is reality television, and the character with the most demonstrable allegiance to hegemonic masculinity losing out in the end is not necessarily true to life. Brion's journey on the show is really interesting and exists against a background of widening divergence in the political ideologies and values of men and women, the latter of whom increasingly refuse to accept the prominence of hegemonic masculinity in their intimate relationships. This is represented on the show through Amir and some of our female protagonists, namely Taylor and Ashley, who leave their boyfriends due to the harmful impact of their contradictory behaviour. Temptation Island is such an entertaining watch and is an absolute goldmine for those looking to understand what is currently happening in the heteroromantic relationships of men and women amidst the most divisive social and political climate yet.